Hi, it's Harvey Lowe, this time on Garage Studio Modelers, and I'm here with...
Dave Forrest.
Right, and today we got another episode, another segment on the Millennium Falcon. For those of you who have been following along, I've been basically focusing on the weathering, and up to this point I've covered modulation, filters, and just a tiny bit about washes and decals, and... Decals. Right. There's a debate on comments about decals or decals. We're going to focus today a bit on more on washes, and I'm going to start using some of these great AK pencils that Dave's also been using on his BT7, but we'll apply it to a sci-fi model. And I have slightly different ways of using the pencil products than Dave does, but it all comes back to the same finish, right, Dave? So today we'll focus a bit more on weathering, and I'll cover a bit about how I do washes.
So, has anything changed on the mall since last? Because it looks to me that we've got some streaking here. And
yes, it has.
It has.
You are very
Can't get anything by me.
Yes, very observant. Hey, Jeff. I saw your comments, Jeff, on about the exhausts, and as that comment came on the YouTube, I was actually working on the exhausts. So I won't cover this in the video, but I will talk about this a little later and how I achieved that. So that was added. I also finished all of the markings and decals. They're all on, and that's the top side. So now I did take some artistic license with some of these. I didn't use them all, as I mentioned in the previous episodes, but the decals are finished. There's now a gloss coat on again. I applied a gloss coat over the decals, and then I'll talk a bit about using that as a base for washes today. So the
looks
decals
good.
are right.
Yeah, it looks really good.
Thanks, and the decals are done.
Yeah.
And I think
Decals.
now we're ready for we're ready for the next one. Yeah. Okay, so we'll be back in a moment, and I'll start talking about washes.
Sounds good.
All right. Okay, so we're back. First thing I'm going to talk about today are the exhausts. And that's basically what I did off camera. And it's probably easy to describe in words how I did this. First of all, I'm not an expert in sci-fi, but I've read on the web and I've had comments that these are exhausts. And so what I decided to do was to apply the techniques that I use for washes on this particular model. So what you can see here are these dark streaks, of course, for exhaust. Now, what do I use for exhaust? It depends on the model. What I wanted for this model was an effect that was subtle, right? And you have many different mediums you can use for exhaust. You can use powders, you can use oil paints, but I used a mixture of Tamiya smoke. I forget the X number, but it's Tamiya smoke.
I think it's X19.
Oh my God! Really? You know this?
I think so. Yeah.
That's okay. Okay. So smoke. Now you can use smoke on its own. It's great for subtle exhausts on things like aircraft, but you'll notice that it's extremely subtle. So in this case, I wanted some more contrast, so I added a couple of drops of Tamiya black to the smoke, and you just basically mist it on in a couple of layers. The closer you move in, the darker the stain or exhaust.
Now, the smoke is a gloss color.
It is.
And so did you add gloss black or flat black?
I added flat black, so I guess I compensated it
so
for...
you kind of knocked the gloss
down.
And did you add anything to that, or did you just spray that on and that's the result of spraying
That's
the mix of the gloss smoke and the flat black?
Yep, but I just put it on like that over the gloss finish. That's it.
And what'd you thin it at?
I usually thin that mixture at about 50-50 roughly.
50.
It's fairly thin. You don't want it thick.
No. Yeah, you want it translucent.
You want it translucent.
And what'd you thin with?
Just the Tamiya.
The
Tamiya X20, but you could use leveling thinner, and we can talk a bit about that in another episode. But yes, it's got to be thin, here's the thing. You got to be fairly close to the surface, but not too close. Too close, it's really dark.
It looks great.
Far away, right?
It looks amazing.
Yeah, you go. I go in really close and then out to blend it in really close and out.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm going this way. I don't know if it's right for the exhaust. I'm going that way.
What's the way it looks like on the studio model?
Right.
Yeah. So it looks, to my eye, it looks.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's really nice.
Thank you. And then I'm using that same Tamiya smoke and black mixture, just a couple of drops of black, not a lot, because you don't want flat black. And I'm just kind of airbrushing in these exhaust areas so that you can see.
That's beautiful. Well done.
Right? Thank you. And so that's how I did the exhaust. Now, ultimately, I'm going to put another coat of flat on it to finish it up. But for now, this exhaust was simply applied to the gloss finish that I'm going to now use as a base for washes. Now, some of you may see the earlier episodes where you had a lot of the modulation going on. That's why I didn't do a lot here, because you're going to cover it up with the exhaust. So when you're modeling, try to plan it out again, that don't do any undue work that if you don't really need to. Like for some aircraft, for example, I don't do a lot of the interior details because I can't see them. Entirely up to you. But that's this gives you an idea of the effect. Now, there's a lot of stuff happening here as well, and I'm going to talk about it today a bit more. It's a thick wash of Winsor Newton oils, and I'm using, again, I talked about this earlier, I'm using a wash made up of 554 Winsor Newton, what is this, raw umber, thick. And I usually mix it with this this Humbrol. You can also mix the wash. See an earlier episode where I tell you how to do the mixture, and I basically keep the wash in a cup like this. You could do, Dave, I saw your work. You could use these tin pallets. I just like to mix up a whole bunch of wash and keep it in these film cups. And then just use that same consistency.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
They do age, though. So these mixtures using Winsor Newton Humbrol oils, if you do these yourself, they will keep for about maybe 5-6 days at the most, where they start to settle down. And you can still use the gunky effect here. But today we're going to use a fresh batch, and I'll show you how I do washes. So that's it for the exhaust. And let's come back and do some washes. Okay, so we're back. Let's start with washes. Everyone's heard about washes. We probably have our own ways of doing them. And I'll show you how I do mine. First thing with washes, I mentioned this earlier, filters that were going on this model go on a flat finish, a very flat finish. Washes go on a gloss finish. They can go on a semi-gloss. Dave, I noticed that you've done washes on a flat surface too.
Yeah, I don't like. I noticed you coated the whole thing in, I guess, in Pledge.
Pledge, yeah, Future, yeah.
I don't. Again, it's a much bigger palette, but I'm different philosophy. Is I just less stuff I have in the model.
Right, but
yes.
you're okay on applying the washes on a flat finish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what I wanted to do with this one is I didn't want to apply it on a flat finish because I want the wash to focus only on the crevices. Right? If I did do it on a flat, you can do that, but what'll happen is that it'll almost act as a filter. So
yeah,
right?
You have to deal with a little bit more cleanup if you do.
You do.
That's the trade-off.
You do.
Yeah.
So when you do the wash, again, if you want it focused on the details, I go with a gloss finish. So even the gun here is a gloss finish, and we'll start with the gun. So just this mixture of wash here, which is again the Winsor Newton. You can see this is a fresh batch. If it's an older batch, it's fairly gummy, and that's what you want. Now, I just kind of put it over the whole thing. I'll use a bigger brush actually. I put it over the whole gun. Now, when you put it, you notice it settles. This wash settles in all the crevices. If I were to tip the model up this way, all that wash is going to settle down here. And that's not really what you want. So when you're applying a wash, I kind of decide, well, in stages, I'm going to put that, it doesn't fall off, how you want that wash effect to look like. And because I want it in the crevices only, I'm going to settle the model on a flat surface and let this settle in. And let it dry. You have a hair dryer. I don't have one here, but you could do that. Hair dryer, though, when you're using this technique, will tend to blow the wash away. So I would apply this light wash like I'm doing now, and I would just leave it in this position for a few minutes. Sometimes when I'm doing a large surface, like a tank with this wash technique on a gloss surface, I'll let it set for like an hour or two. But don't let it set beyond, let's say, 5 hours, because I found that you're not getting it off. This Winsor Newton stuff, once it dries, there's no reactivation. Okay? Now, you can see I've applied it all over the place, and I can come back and clean it up. Sometimes you want to clean it up, sometimes you don't. Now, you take a clean new brush with some fresh thinner, right? And just wipe off the excess. And all you're doing is wiping away the top edges. Now, I'm doing this fairly quickly, but you can see that I'm only leaving the wash in the crevices, because I want a very dark wash in only the crevices and not on the flat horizontal surfaces.
Harv, could you use a makeup sponge instead? To remove the...
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm using a thin brush here because of the details, but yes, you can get these sponges in any drugstore. And usually what I do is
or just steal them from your wife.
Steal them from what? Yeah, but they can't be used though. They can be
They
clean.
can't be used. Yeah, steal the clean ones.
You got to. That's a good point. You can use a sponge. In fact, I don't think you have a sponge here. But if you apply, let's talk about. That's why. By the way, guys, when we do this Garage Studio modeling, we don't do a lot of takes.
We don't do any.
No, I don't think we do any takes.
Yes, live.
So if you let's say apply this wash, this is going on a gloss finish. Okay. Now that's applied right. You can have it settle in the crevices, but if I left it like that, it's going to dry like that after about 5 hours. I could use the sponge, right, and stipple it here. I don't have one with me, and that would give a neat little stipple. Yeah. I like using the Winsor Newtons here because it's got this consistency with the Humbrol thinner. I find it works best with Humbrol thinner. It works okay with the odorless, although it does smell a little more. I find this stuff works really well with Winsor Newton. And when you put it on like that, you see how this is almost like a filter.
Yeah. Yeah, it's altered the tone. Yeah.
Yeah. You can leave it as a filter. Or you can clean your brush. As I mentioned before, if you had a sponge, you could stipple it and leave it. In this case, if you leave that, let's say you let it I'll let it settle a bit. I'll show you how you can, maybe it'll still work now on a clean brush, flat with a bunch of busted hairs on the end. You can use it to streak. Now it's still wet, so you can't see it. But if you let it sit there longer, you can streak it with this, and there's your streaking effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But in this case, I'm going to clean it up because I don't want a filter effect there, and I only want it to settle in the recesses. And again,
now you're using a broad, like when you first applied that on there, you're using a fairly wide brush.
Yeah.
Would you use, like, if you just wanted to have it go into the panel lines, would you just use like a thin brush to apply it?
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I'll do in a moment. But you're right. Yeah, I'm using a thick one just to show this effect. But you're right. And this effect, you don't want a broad brush. Now let's take that for a moment. Let's say you got this big broad brush. You see, we're not rehearsing this. You're gonna take this. Now, if I want to do this whole panel, I could just do that. But you notice that when I put that on, it's changing. It's a filter,
yeah.
Right? Now, if you really want to do that way, you could. You put a thick brush. But what's going to happen again is let's let that dry a bit, and then we'll do some streaks with the oil, with the residual oil left over in the. But you see, it's changed the tone.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you use a thin brush, you're just going over the crevices and the details, right? You can leave that, but I just don't want a filter. So now this looks messy. That's why we don't have a script here. So this is a thin brush. Now with this formula I'm using with the Humbrol thinner and the Winsor Newton, you got to keep shaking this once and so often because it does settle. But you see, you're just kind of putting in the details here. Right? Now, it does kind of look a little odd because the wash is fairly. And you have an option to keep this as a thick wash, a thin one. When you're doing these panel lines, I kind of like it a little more thick because I want the intentional settle. Now, Dave, you use that Tamiya, what do you call the panel line? What's it called? The panel line?
Panel liner?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you like? How do you?
I do. Yeah.
I've never used it.
They're surprisingly good. Yeah.
Do you thin them?
No.
You can use them for this effect then too.
You could very much. Yeah.
Okay, but you don't thin them.
I do not.
And it's a lacquer, or what is it? Enamel?
I think it's enamel based. Don't quote me on that. But I think I've used enamel thinners to clean them up.
Now, if I tilt the model, the wash is going to run. See, look at that. You're going to run there. Just leave it for now. So when you do this technique, I like to let it settle for a bit, and actually, we're going to leave that blob there. We're going to work with it a little later. So let that dry for a couple of minutes while I work on. By the way, I forgot to mention, Bill Campbell, you mentioned some comments to me on the YouTube comment section. Because I'm a military model, did I recognize any military parts on this model? Now, different conversation. I'll let that dry. And Dave over here recognized a few parts. You got a good eye, Dave. If you take that's a tiger? Or?
Yeah, let's look at it. The King Tiger.
King Tiger, look. King Tiger, 72nd scale, right? And you do have odds. There's another section here. And there's another one here. And you've got some little wheels and doodads. I didn't see that, and I didn't notice it. But you can see that there are probably some parts borrowed from some military models here.
Yeah, because I think when they were initially building it, they bought a bunch of Tamiya kits and used whatever parts cannibalized to make the Falcon, right?
Now, we'll talk about a separate discussion when you start your next project of your 38T. But if you're scratch building, Shepeen used the term gizmology. I use it all the time when I'm scratch building. And if you do that, I find that if you try to use parts where they're not entirely recognizable, this is okay because it's subtle. Otherwise, it looks like you've just totally taken something from a P-51.
Yeah, that you have to look for a little. It doesn't pop out at you.
It doesn't pop out. So let that dry a bit. Now, I cheated a bit because, look, I did this part earlier with the washes. See? Look, that's already dry. Now, I've already taken a dry brush and wiped away the top surfaces, the highlights, to leave the wash in. Done that down here, and I'll see the panel lines are now really, really. I like the 554 raw umber because it's got this brown patina. I don't like using pure black for these panel lines. I like that brown patina. That's just my style.
Yep.
Right?
Now, looks good. Looks really good.
Be careful that if you do use the raw umber as a wash, you'll notice that your model will have that brown patina to it, which is fine for a military model. I think it works on this. Just choose your color carefully. If it's a ship, you might want to choose something else. If it's got a different base color. But I find that this 554 is like you. I know you mentioned you have some favorite colors. This is one of my go-to because it works well on any type of surface because it's very subtle. But we talked about this before. I don't like black because I think it's too.
Yeah, it's too stark.
It's too stark. Let that dry a bit. You could use a hair dryer. Maybe next time I'll bring one. Now I'm going to flip this over and show you what I did last time. I always get nervous. Like I want to drop this thing. Down here is the same wash applied, but with a gunky, letting it sit a bit. And I did not remove any excess wash on this, just to see that if you want this kind of overall gummed effect, that's okay too. Now I did this one and I did this one kind of like it's the the undercarriage, undersides of the air might have had a slightly different weathering effect. That's an artistic license. Also, this gun here received, see the wash is a little more cleaner. What I'm doing on the top side, this one's already done. And as I said before, this one is where I flipped it over, did the wash, let it settle for about an hour, cleaned it up, right? So you apply the wash, let it settle a bit, let it dry in the crevices, and then clean it up, clean up the top spots with clean thinner. And that way you get it settling in the crevices. But let it sit for a while and let that oil settle in there and dry. If you do it fresh off the bat, you're just simply wiping away the oils. Can you use the other products? I know there's a ton of products on washes. You can. I just like the Winsor Newton because I had a whole bunch of them, and I find that I like my control over my own mixture and consistency. I find those ones are great, but you have to thin those as well. So flip it back over. Let's see if it's dried a bit more. See, it's beginning to dry already. See? But again, if I leave that, it's going to stay like that. So now that you can tell it's dry because it's now got this semi-gloss look to it. And you do get some watermarks, or I guess they're thinner. Tide marks? Where does that come from, tide? Like, is it like a tidal wave tide mark?
I think so.
Or is it like Tide, the detergent cleaner Tide, because it leaves marks on your laundry? Oh, I don't know. Anyways.
We're going to get sued by Tide.
Yeah, we're going to get sued by Tide. All right, now I've got a flat, clean brush that I've wiped away the excess thinner. Now, you see, you want to use a flat brush for this guy because you want to clean away those Tide marks, see? And you're left with the stuff in the middle. I could put a little more there if I want, just to get that. But you see, I'm not going in the... Could you do the whole thing? You could do a big flat brush. You could do that too. But sometimes I want to leave the... You could do this. It's faster, but I kind of like leaving the wash pretty stark in there. So washes are still the thing for me. I like using them. And you can see you're making sure that there's no wash in the center panels. Now I'm taking all this stuff off and only leaving it in the crevices, see? Pretty easy. Now because I've modulated it, it adds to it so that the modulation is underneath the wash. Could I come back with modulation? I could, but I'm pretty satisfied with this. As I said earlier, the trick is knowing when to stop. Now I can do this stuff over the decals as well because these have been protected with the Pledge Future. Now I could also use Model Master Acryl. I know some guys like Jerry Brennan, he uses Tamiya gloss with leveling thinner. It really is up to you what type of gloss you use, but because the model is so big, I decided to use Pledge Future. But again, let that stuff dry. It does take a few days to completely harden. Now, so this part is basically done. And how long did that take me? Not long. You get these little details. You could clean those up a bit, right? Come back and clean up this. I hope you can see in the light.
So the thinner that you're using to clean that is just pure Humbrol.
Pure Humbrol, yeah, because my mixture is Humbrol. As I said before, I've tried using this stuff. It does work with the Winsor Newtons, but it's softer. I find this Abtalung odorless thinner. It's great stuff. It's softer, but the advantage of that stuff is it doesn't stink. The Humbrol stuff does smell. You can probably smell it now.
I can smell it. Yeah, I'm a little bit high on it.
Yes.
Nice.
That's the other thing we need to do is... It's better to get high on modeling than it is on crystal meth, right? There you go. Now, I haven't done anything in there yet, but let's let that dry a bit more. And let's... Now, when you're using this mixture of the thinner, Robert, just go in here. I use the paint can. I usually go right to the bottom because this stuff does settle. See? And I do want to leave it on the brush and then just hit the highlights. Because it's really glossy, it's only going into the crevices. Now, again, when I do this, I'm going to set it down on a flat surface, let it dry for about an hour or two, and then come back and remove the excess. But because we're doing this live, see how it's settling in over gloss? Now, if you did it over a semi-flat, it'll spread out a bit more and act like a filter, but that's okay. Whatever technique you want, right? I'm doing a bit more on the pipes here.
Could you use a dark gray on that too?
Yeah, absolutely. Dark gray would be good on this. It depends on your preference of the color palette that you want to produce. And that's where you can't really it's not a step-by-step how-to, it's your eye. It's then becomes your eye as a modeler, and I find that everyone has their own, I guess you've reached the Zen moment when people recognize your work because you have a certain style, right? I begin to recognize certain modelers' works around the world anyways. But anyways, so clean a bit of that up. And I'm using the Humbrol thinner. Actually, I'm using the Humbrol thinner in this little cup here, by the way. You can buy these at art stores, and then you can put the cap on it to keep your thinner from spilling, right? So this part's done. This part's done. That part is done earlier. And you see there's little dark areas of the wash left around these markings, and because there's a future floor wax applied over the decals, it's kept them safe from this stuff, because otherwise it'd start to eat into the decals. By the way, you can see I know I did an episode on decaling. The solvent set I use is really working well, because that whole decal is over that entire pipe detail. It's settling in quite nicely. If it doesn't, just poke it with a number 11 blade and put some more solvent set. But always test your decal setting solution before you use them on the model. All right, so we'll just do a bit more up here now. See, now look at this one. I want that wash to really settle in. And I also want the wash to settle in these little great details. And again, don't tilt your model. Like, I'm just showing you how, but I would leave that set flat and let it dry. Now that looks horrible. Leave it, right? Because I want a stark, and then I'll come back and oh yeah, the other thing is I'll come back and dry brush. Yes, I still dry brush, but I'll show you the mixture I use for dry brushing, which when I come to it later, just put a placeholder. I'm actually, for my dry brushing, I mix Winsor Newton oils with acrylics. You can do that, guys. You can mix different things.
You're a crazy chemist,
Oh,
Harv.
yeah, and I don't have a chemistry degree. I'm an urban planner, but... So there you go. Just a little more there. You get so there's the idea of the wash, and I'm going to come back and let that dry a little bit more. I like taking this thick stuff and going into these details. I don't touch anything else around it, just let it settle. And it looks horrible. Let it settle for the perfect time. If I got an egg timer, and then you can set the egg timer for like 2 hours, and then it's perfect to work it, right? So you see that now we're being a little bit quick on the camera here because I want to do it live. But if you let it right now, you see that if you want to leave it. I actually don't like it because there's a bit of contrast here by eye. Now take a clean brush. Actually, take a wider one. And I like brushes with a lot of frizzled hairs. And then if I do this, maybe keep my arms in the way of the light, but let me do this with my arm blocking the light. See? There's a streak effect right there. Whether you use pencils or whether you use anything else, then you can control it, right? But once you're at this stage, make sure that you want the right effect of your streaking, because once it dries after 5 hours, you're not getting that off. Okay? Now the same could go here, or I could do the whole thing. See? Now, I would let it dry a little more, because the longer you let it dry, the more stark your streaking will be. Because basically the thinner and the carrying fluid is dried up. And all you're left with is the oil residue. I like this technique. Specifically, I build a lot of Braille scale models, and it's a lot subtler in small scale to do this way. You can use these guys. That's fine too, and I'm going to use some here as well. But I find with this oil stuff, the Winsor Newton and the Humbrol mix, it allows me a lot more control. Now, I just think it's a little too streaky, and I don't want this filter effect, so I'm just taking a bit off. I'm going to leave a bit of that streaking there, and just, it's really up to you. If you do streak this area, I would also do a bit over here, right? For consistency, because when if you want to enter contests, there is this thing called consistency and finish, and if there's streaking here, there should be here. It's just make sure that it's consistent. I'm taking a little bit more of this off. I just wanted to show you how I do it. And you want a uniform, kind of uniform appearance. You can see because I left the thinner to dry more on this panel than this one. Look, there's definitely a filter effect. It's kind of a filter, but not a filter. Do you know what I mean? It's because I'm taking a lot of it off, but you can still see there's a patina look to this. Less here.
Yeah, there's
right?
no difference.
So that's working with oils. I'm just going to streak it a bit. You can take this streaking, like if there's some residual oils, leave it on your brush, and you can use it in other areas of the model. See? As what's left over from the oil as further streaking. You can see it here, see? That's the residual oil from over here. You can apply this to any type of model. I love using this technique on my ship models because it's subtle. Okay? Now, let's close up the Humbrol. By the way, Robert, our producer, gave me these. What are these, Robert? Ball bearings from a car repair shop that's been cleaned in lacquer. And we use these to shake up our paints. Just as a matter of conversation while I'm closing this stuff up. Now, let's take... Okay, so we've got a dark brown oil brusher. We've got buff. What we got here? Medium soil. Now, these are Dave's colors, but I'm going to borrow them. So now you got to make a choice. Okay, if I'm going to use... You don't have to use after you've done this, but let's try them. You can always... I call it layering, right? And again, the trick is knowing when to stop. Guys, do not use every technique in the arsenal on a model. I think it's too much. In other words, you know, I need to do a wash. I need to do hairspray. I could do hairspray on this, but I don't think I'm gonna do hairspray on this model because I think I'm already there. You could, but I find after a while it's too busy, right? It's like a filter. If you've got like 5, 6 different kinds of filters on, you've already lost the filter. This one's a little too stark, so I'm not going to use the dark brown because that's kind of this wash. That's not bad. Like it kind of matches the gray. I could use that. I don't know. Let's try it. If it doesn't work, I'll blame you, Dave.
That's fine.
If you haven't used these, the advantage of these is got this. Do these have a shelf life, Dave? These oil brushes? Do you think?
They might. I haven't.
Not yet, eh?
No, not. I mean, they last. I like them. I think they're real convenient. Again, I thought they were gimmicky like the pencils, but
yeah.
After you use them, yeah.
And they're oil based.
Yeah.
Now, you guys heard of the dot technique? Well, I'm just kind of messing around. I could use it here. I have no idea how this is going to turn out. By the way, you could blend them in this way. And again, you can see we're live. So that gives this panel a bit more of a beige color with the oils. Or with a very dry brush, you can... Actually, I'm going to use a thinner brush. You can use the good old oil mapping. You can put dots of different colors. I've seen Dave do it on his armor. I'm doing it quickly, but you get the idea. Now, I particularly don't like the effect right now. I think it's too harsh here, but it gives you an idea that it's up to you. You can tone it down if you don't like it. See? With a bit more. I like less is best. Right? Now, that's got a bit of a beige. That's definitely a brown patina. You can layer them. But I think when you're doing these types of techniques, they should somehow balance each other. Because if you've got... It's okay to have this starkness and the red starkness. That's different. But I think when you're weathering with washes and filters, I kind of make sure that there's a balance, right? So whatever's happening here should happen somewhere else on this huge palette. Otherwise, it looks kind of like unbalanced, right? Now, we're going to come back to some more cleanup. So you notice how this, again, no matter how much I'm cleaning this up, there's still this brown patina. I don't let it dry for about maybe 15 minutes. So you can still lighten it up a bit. That's a decal with the little flaking happening. You can use hairspray technique there. Maybe we'll go on a different type of model next time. But I'm even softening this up a bit more. and I'm taking the residual and I'm applying elsewhere. I still got to do this because it's very, very light gray, right? So you can use the residual. See the residual on your brush? You can use this on other areas if you want. It's very subtle. Now I'll take some thinner sometimes and just take a big wash down and give it like a, like the water's kind of going down. You can see the subtleness there. You are after a subtle finish. Use this on, I love this technique on ships, especially on the hulls of subs. By the way, guys, I do many different types of models. I'm starting on cars, so I'm hoping to get some techniques from you out there on gloss finishes. But I find that working with different subject matters gives you a feeling of different techniques. Now, earlier I was watching Dave's episode in the BT7, the vertical surfaces streaks, right? It's the horizontal surfaces. Now, this model's a little different because the horizontal surface has got all these details. It's not a wide palette where you can then start using the powders and the things that Dave was using as BT7. If it's while this is a large palette, you've got all these interesting patterns happening here, and so then you can just use these details as you're weathering on the surface, right? You can use powders on this, but I don't think I'm going to use powders because I want to finish this model for my client in time. I could spend hours, days, weeks painting this model using powders, but as I said before, you don't have to use every technique. This is another example here, by the way, where I use smoke to build up. That's the original black primer. Now it's got some smoke happening. I put a little gray in there. I got some more battle damage up here. Right, that's battle damage that came with a kit, by the way. I didn't do that. So let that dry. I let that dry a bit more, and now you can see with the light the effect you're getting. Now you see here, because it's being a gloss surface, it's really settling in, and there's not a lot of cleanup I have to do with that. Just these areas here where the surfaces, just clean those up. Now I'm doing it fairly quickly, and what'll happen is when I come back and dry brush to get the highlights, it'll even be better. Now, I don't know if you can see it, Robert, but that here, right, that's where it's still drying, it's settling in. I'd let that dry a little more. But that is different than that, where I'm not taking any of the highlights away and it's just grunge. And it's again using this Humbrol Winsor Newton oils mix. Okay. So we'll stop there, and then what I'll do is I'll finish up the model. Oh, pencils. Let's do some pencils. Now, this is, what do we got here? This is a strong ochre?
Ochre.
Ochre? Did they spell ochre right?
Yeah, ochre.
O-E-R-R-E? Anyways, I'll use... Now, by the way, with pencils, you can dip the pencil in water, and you can just see it's when you dip it in water, it's a little more subtle and forgiving, and you can use a completely dry brush, and you can start working the streaks that way. See? There. I want a little strong. Now, if you're going to do that, kind of make sure that you do this in other parts of the model so it's balanced. I'm guessing that, I don't know if there's rust in space, but there's rust on my model.
There you go.
Right? So that's where you dip the pencil, and Dave mentioned use a little bit of dish liquid in there. That's dipping it in. Could take a dry one. Now this one is, dark rust. So this is completely dry. It's completely dry. Now this is going on a gloss finish. So it does work. It's subtler. If this was going on a flat finish, there would be a huge chipping thing going on there.
Yeah, it would be more for it to bite into, right?
It's more for it to bite into. But that's actually not bad because I kind of like subtleness. Now, I'm also I don't do a lot of chipping on my models, but this is where it's going on a gloss surface. It's not bad, right? It's...
Well, I think they're... The more I use them, the more I like the pencils.
Yeah.
I think they're
too.
really versatile.
They are.
And they're easy cleanup.
Yeah, they are.
They don't stink.
I don't know. See, even these little scratches, see? There's different ways. It's really up to you as a modeler. This is the scratchy look. That's using dark rust. Yeah, you've got Dave's left you some pencils here. There are other colors that you can use. Oh, here's a streaking dirt. Right? Now, it's going to be so subtle that you probably won't see much, but see how you can actually draw it on? See? See? You can draw it on. It's up to you. Right? And I like subtle.
Yeah, no, subtle looks good. Subtle's always good.
Yeah. Now, if I was building this model, like say for a competition, whatever, I'd probably try it on a separate. But sometimes it's okay to experiment. Look, because if you don't like this, you can just take it off with water and it's gone, right? Now when you use water to put it on with the pencils over oils, you can do that in one sitting because they won't affect the oils.
Well, that's the nice thing about having like enamel-based mediums and water-based mediums is that you can layer one on top of the other. It's not going to impact.
Yeah, exactly. Keep going back and forth. Again, this is going on a gloss. I actually like it. Look, it's very subtle when it's going on a gloss finish. So when you use these pencils, it's not just the pencils themselves. It's the surface that you're applying to that'll give you the effect. Now, I mentioned earlier even when I did the modulation, there's only like 2 or 3 colors here. I'm controlling the tone by how much paint I put on, how close I am to the surface, and then I'm using the washes to get in the details. I'll use the dry brush to highlight, and the pencils. You can use the effect I'm getting with the pencils is like scratching. I could use them as washes, like here. You can also use, obviously, your Abtalon and your oils for your, I believe, who coined that term? Mike Rinaldi, oil mapping, I think, where you, I'm not going to do this at this sitting, but you can take a bit of oil paint. Actually, maybe I will. So you can take a bit of this oil paint. Now, normally, I don't have any cardboard with it. I put it on cardboard so to let the oil soak off because there's quite a bit of oil in here. But if you take the oil paint, put a drop on a cardboard, let it dry let that puddle dry to take the oil out on the cardboard, and then come with the brush and you can use the oils here. That's pretty stark, right? And then you can either use them for streaking or you can use them in the crevices to build even more effect. See? To build even more effect. And then when you put the oils in there, you come back with a completely dry, I'm going to steal one of Dave's brushes, completely dry brush with maybe just a tint of thinner in it, and you're just working it. See? You're working the darkness back. You're giving a more effect of a darkness in the... You can do that with...
a little bit of shading in the
corner. You do post shading. Yeah. Targeted post shading. I like that. Targeted. Oh, we can't use words like targeted or attack. Those are politically incorrect terms. We must use things like friendly engagement of the surface with the product, stuff like that.
Spoken like a true bureaucrat.
I am a bureaucrat. We must engage the model, okay? We must make the model feel like it's being engaged, but we can't attack it.
You can't attack the model.
We can't attack a model, no. That's too violent. So see that's oil. That's purely from Winsor Newton oil. You could look at the effect here. There's the oil. There's the pencil. Now, if you were looking at this, could you tell the difference from, let's say you didn't know what, you looked at you can't, right? So
you have to be real up close.
Yeah, you can use these. You don't have to use all of the arsenal, but whatever suits your fancy. It's entirely up to you. It's not bad. I kind of like that. Would I win at a convention, Star Wars convention? I don't know.
Well, it looks pretty nice. It's hard to argue with how well it looks.
Right.
Or how good it looks.
Now, when you are... See, now this is dried with the pencil. That's not bad. That's kind of like a mini flaking or something. It's not bad. I'm going to leave it. I would not... These are the clear parts. I would not put a wash in this area. I've used the Tamiya tape to mask off the canopy. I would not use this this wash oil technique in this area because it could seep under the tape.
Yeah, then you're in trouble.
And you're in trouble with the canopy. Just you're better off using the targeted oil mapping and just kind of work it around the panels. But I would not slosh on like I did over here. I would not slosh on the wash. It's going to go right into your canopy. So I'd leave it, right? And I'm probably going to come back and do some more on the, you can do some of the reds and over the beiges in the same way. I'll come back. Now, back to the gun, just to finish up. I can take a completely dry brush and just simply, after it's dried, just wipe it off and it's left in the crevices. This one here, look how stark that is. That one is going to be, this technique does take a little more time, especially if you, this technique works well in Braille scale, because then your model's going to look like this, but then, you know, this is a little bit of a thicker brush, but you're taking away the excess. I find this works very well in Braille. 35th, I suppose. But you see the leftover on the, you can use it elsewhere. See? Whatever. But that's pretty gummy. You could take your finger and just wipe it. See? But I'm doing the fast way. And you're left entirely with the wash and the crevice. If you find that that's too stark, then you just get rid of it, right? You can start over and just work it in and you can get rid of it. I don't know what that is, some sort of hatch. Again, some residual stuff left over. You can even do that, see? A little bit of, if you don't like it, use your finger. See? That smudging is kind of the same as the pencil. It really is up to you. It just gives you a different way of using these techniques. That's why when we're doing these garage studio modeling, Dave and I thought, let's try to use these products in different ways. And I think that's the beauty of modeling, and you don't have to stick to one all the time. So we'll end it here, and then I'll come back with some dry brushing, and I think once after the dry brushing, we'll flip on the lights on the model and show you what the final model looks like in an upcoming episode. So that's it for today. It's hard to know. I'm signing off from Garage Studio Modeling. Dave, do you want to say anything while I go, or goodbye, hello?
Looks good. Harley.
Yeah?
Looks really, wow.
Well, I have
Impressive.
poor self-esteem, so by you saying that, it really makes my day. So thank you for that. And,
Whatever helps.
okay, and we'll see you next time.